This is the Jeanine Pirro Show. Now, here's Judge Jeanine Pirro.
Welcome back to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. Joining us now is the founder and president of Internet Accountability Project, IAP, Article 3 Project, which is a project where they defend conservative judges against attacks and the weaponization of government. He is also a former law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, and even more important and impressive, I should say, was chief counsel to the nominating committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee for the Supreme Court justices under Chuck Grassley. Please join me in welcoming Mike Davis to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. Now, folks, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on his background, but this guy is the real deal. He's worked in the Supreme Court in Washington, and as he says, he was identifying and fighting the weaponization of government that we are seeing on a regular basis, as he says, quote, before it was cool. So welcome to the show, Mike Davis. Let's talk about the indictment of former President Donald Trump and candidate for President Donald Trump. This indictment, as I see it, as a former DA myself, is insufficient on its face. It is beyond the statute of limitations. It is a selective prosecution. It doesn't identify what the crime is. It raises it from a 2-year misdemeanor statute of limitations. And even in the indictment itself, I'm looking at it, Mike, and there's about the first 20 counts that are before September of 2017, which is 5 years ago. So can someone tell me what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, Judge, I think you're exactly right here. This, I think what you're getting to is this is a bogus political prosecution by this Soros-funded Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg. He came up with this bogus legal theory to go after Trump. And
all right, I'm going to interrupt you right here because I've seen them interrupt you on other channels that I won't mention, and they say, well, he's not really Soros funded. Why don't you explain how this DA Alvin Bragg is Soros funded?
Well, they say it's actually quite funny, Judge. They say if you point this out, you're anti-Semitic. Apparently, my Jewish friends like to get carjacked and raped and robbed and murdered and beat up on the New York subway. But putting that aside, let's talk about the funding. There are the Democrats keep talking about that the color of change earmarked $1 million for Bragg's campaign, but he only got $500,000 of that. Well, that's still George Soros money going to color of change and going to Alvin Bragg's, supporting Alvin Bragg's candidacy for the Manhattan.
But so what you're saying is there was a PAC he gave money to, and the PAC gave money to Soros. It's almost like an intermediary, like,
actually, they say it wasn't $1 million; it was $500,000. What they're leaving out is there's a second PAC called the New York Justice and Public Safety PAC. So George Soros, they're right. George Soros did not give $1 million to Alvin Bragg's campaign. He gave $1.1 million.
Okay, through the PACs.
Through these two PACs, the Color
Right.
of Change and New York Justice and Public Safety PAC.
Okay, so let's get to the indictment itself. Everybody agrees, and I don't want to spend time on it, that the statute of limitations on the misdemeanor falsifying a business record was dead, in 2018?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean,
why is he indicting on 34 counts?
Well, because he's using a bogus legal theory. He's using a legal theory to transform these misdemeanors at best for bookkeeping, which I don't even know how he would be a bookkeeping misdemeanor, but let's just play along and pretend like these are misdemeanors for bookkeeping based upon Trump allegedly paying off Stormy Daniels $130,000 in 2016 to go away, right? Settling a nuisance claim to make her go away.
Right.
From based upon allegedly a 2005 or 2006
right.
affair or whatever it was. So what they're doing is they're saying that he committed another crime to cover up the prior, to cover up these payments. So he committed another crime to cover up these misdemeanors, and so therefore you're transforming this from a misdemeanor into a felony. The problem is Alvin Bragg did not include in the indictments what the other crime was, right, to make this a felony. So as you said, Judge, this on its face, this indictment should be dismissed under the sufficiency of the indictment is lacking, right?
But what Alvin Bragg said was, I don't have to say what that second crime is. Now, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, although he's got to say in a bill of particulars because an indictment is there to illustrate to the defendant what he's being charged with. Why wouldn't he put the charge in there? What is he afraid of? What is he hiding?
Well, that's just it, Judge. I don't know what you guys do in New York, but, everywhere else in America, you put the legal allegations in the indictment because we have this pesky thing called the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, where people need to be on fair notice what the allegations are against them so they can defend themselves. Well, we'll put that aside because New York apparently doesn't follow the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. But like you said, Judge, even if somehow in New York you don't have to put the legal allegations in the indictment, this is the first indictment ever of a former president who happens to be a leading candidate for president again. Why would you not use the good judgments to say, you know what, we're going to have an airtight case here. If we're going to go into this unprecedented territory, why would you not want to have an airtight case here? And the reason is maybe he doesn't have one. Because remember, the prior Manhattan DA declined to bring these charges at Alvin Bragg's urging when Alvin Bragg worked in the New York Attorney General's office. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office declined to bring these charges. The Federal Election Commission declined to bring these charges. Alvin Bragg, when he started off as DA, declined to bring these charges. Then Pomerantz, one of his assistant DAs, unethically, I would argue, quit and wrote a book and went public and explained his theory of the case versus Trump. And then Alvin Bragg takes this heat from the left. And back in December, Alvin Bragg says, okay, I'm going to hire this senior Biden Justice Department official, this Matthew Colangelo from the Biden Justice Department. He was in the number 3's office, a senior political appointee with a long track record of being a left-wing operative, including 7 years at the NAACP, Obama Justice Department under Eric Holder and Tom Perez in the Civil Rights Division, Department of Labor Chief of Staff for political appointee.
Okay, so this guy is Colangelo. Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Matthew Colangelo.
Okay, so I just want to identify what you're saying. Mark Pomerantz is a former assistant United States attorney. Okay, all of a sudden he goes to Manhattan DA's office to be an assistant DA, and then I agree, improperly, unethically writes a book when he doesn't get his way to indict Trump. Then you've got this Colangelo, who's with the United States at the third in the Justice Department under Biden, the Biden Justice Department, and he leaves to be an assistant DA in Manhattan. I mean, if that isn't White House collusion with the DA's office, I don't know what is.
I mean, they brought him in. It was like they brought him. They created these posts for him. So he worked in the Obama Justice Department, the Obama Labor Department under Tom Perez, the Obama White House as an economic advisor, the Democrat New York AG. They essentially created a Trump derangement syndrome unit with Colangelo running it for 4 years and constantly suing Trump, the Trump administration, investigating Trump's businesses. And then when Biden won, this Colangelo was on the parachute team to go into the Justice Department. Those are the most hardcore loyalists who were on the politically appointed parachute team. He was the acting number 3, the associate attorney general. And then when Vanita Gupta, who is a total left-wing radical, became the associate attorney general, Matthew Colangelo was her number 2. He was the number 2 to the number 3. These are the two people who sicked the FBI and the Justice Department after Christians praying outside of abortion clinics while they gave amnesty to abortion industry activists terrorizing Catholic churches, crisis pregnancy centers, and Supreme Court
pregnancy centers that simply are there to help women who want to continue with their pregnancy.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we've got is, according to you, we've got this connection, and now they have this indictment, which doesn't, identify the crime that raises it to a felony that would allow it to be prosecuted. I mean, at some point, they've got to, in the Bill of Particulars, Mike Davis, be able to identify what that crime is.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're going to say, this is what they were leaking out of the grand jury and leaking before the indictment, was they're going to use federal election law that somehow Trump using his own money to make Stormy Daniels go away in 2016, somehow that's an illegal campaign contribution. Remember, Hillary Clinton used campaign funds in 2016. She was up in New York doing this, used campaign funds in 2016 to pay for the Steele dossier with Perkins Coie and use this bogus Russian collusion hoax to go after Trump and try to win the election based upon that.
And she took that as a legal expense. But I think the outrageous part of that is not only did they then spy on a presidential candidate, but they divided the country. They went to a FISA court and got a judge to actually issue warrants based on a false dossier that she paid for, that she took as a business, as a legal expense. It's crazy. Yeah. So where are we now, Mike? Where are we now with this whole thing?
Well, I would say she even spied on President Trump when he was in the White House. That's how scary it is. But anyway, so where are we on this thing now? Is we have this bogus indictment against Trump by Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg with this bogus legal theory that he won't even say what his legal theory is, but apparently it's this federal election legal theory that Brad Smith, a former commissioner on the Federal Election Commission, debunked in a Wall Street Journal piece, saying this is just a completely bogus theory. Again, rejected by Manhattan DA, Manhattan U.S. Attorney, and Federal Election Commission, and Bragg himself. And so they're bringing these charges. This is part of legal lawfare. This is lawfare against Trump. It's on several different fronts. It's in Manhattan. It's in Fulton County, Georgia, with their Democrat DA, Fani Willis. It's with Garland's hand-picked special counsel, Jack Smith, another Democrat. This is part of lawfare by the Biden administration, by President Biden, to take out Trump because Biden fears he can't beat him in the next election.
Well, I think that what's going to happen now is we're going to go to the motions period, and the judge gave the date of December 4th for motions. What does that tell you?
Well, it's a very long way off. Apparently, he wants to drag this out as long as he can. I don't know a lot about this judge. You may know about this judge, but it does, to me, raise some concerns that he don't look. Yeah, there people are saying his daughter worked for the for the Biden-Harris administration or campaign or whatever it was, and his wife did this or whatever. I'm concerned about what the judge did. And the judge donated to President Biden's presidential campaign against President Trump. So,
but the truth is that the judge has to recuse himself, and he's not going to do that. We already know that. I was a judge. It's kind of crazy that what you do is you have to say, yeah, I agree, I can't be fair. But there's no one who's going to make him do that, and he doesn't sound like he wants to do it. But that's not going to happen. So
let me ask you, Judge. Does a campaign contribution to Biden against Trump, does that raise at least the appearance of bias?
Yeah, and that's the test, the appearance of impropriety and bias when you give money to the opposing candidate of the candidate that's been indicted. And by the way, the opposing candidate is the one, who you've already made a connection to in terms of moving an attorney from the Justice Department to Manhattan. And that's why, of course, they want to bring people before the Congress, James Comer and his whole committee. It's kind of scary what's going on, but they say that this is inuring to the benefit of Donald Trump. Is it?
Well, I mean, maybe Donald Trump should get up and say, every time this Alvin Bragg, who I can't believe that Harvard and Harvard Law School gave this guy a degree. I mean, it's really embarrassing because that was the dumbest press conference I've ever seen. So every time Alvin Bragg gets up and give a press conference, Donald Trump should say, I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message.
Yep. Well, The judge, the good news is he has not gagged the president. We'll see if he does gag the president. We'll see if that's going to happen. Based upon the president's speech that night, the president I thought was cautious in terms of not saying too much about the judge, which is probably a good decision on his part. But how do you think this ends up? Is Georgia going to indict the president? Is the Justice Department under Jack Smith going to indict the former president?
I think every one of these prosecutors has the intention of indicting Trump. The problem is they're all bogus investigations. They're investigating non-crimes in all three instances. It's not a crime to object to a presidential election. If it were a crime to object to a presidential election, Democrats would be in jail to objecting to the 1969, 2001, 2005,
2016,
17. Objecting to presidential elections is specifically allowed by the Electoral Counts of 1887. It's specifically allowed by the First Amendment. It's only a crime to object to presidential elections in third world Marxist hellholes. So that's part of Jack Smith's investigation. That's also Fannie Willis's investigation in Fulton County, Georgia. We also have the Jack Smith investigation for President Trump having his presidential records in the office of former president in Mar-a-Lago, which is allowed by the Presidential Elections Act, the Presidential Records Act. It doesn't matter whether they're classified or not. This is why Congress gives former presidents federally funded staff with security clearances and secure office space called SCIFs and Secret Service protection. They're allowed to have classified records. They're allowed to have their presidential records classified or not. It's allowed by the Presidential Records Act. Contrast that with Biden. When he was the former vice president, he was not. And Biden got caught with several stashes of Obama's stolen classified records in several different locations. And the New York Post, Miranda Devine, pointed out that Hunter Biden almost certainly used stolen classified material to draft a 23-paragraph proposal to get Ukrainian and Chinese funding. So you tell me what happened with Garland. Garland went to a biased magistrate judge, Bruce Reinhart, who had recused on Trump's prior cases because Reinhart posted a Facebook post going after Trump politically. Garland goes back to this Reinhart, gets an unprecedented, unnecessary, unlawful home raid on a former president, an office of former president, to get back records Trump was allowed to have. And at the same time, he knew Biden didn't have these stolen classified records and kept it quiet for months, swept it under the rug, let Biden's attorneys do their own searches. They did four searches, and they said that they got all the records, and then the FBI went in after.
All right. Thank you, Mike Davis. All right.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. Up next here.